Session for Smart City Foundation Sustainability Series. For our viewers, I want to highlight that the focus of this session is to talk about potential deterrent to faster renewable adoption and opportunities that it provides. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you,
I will
Vinod.
begin with a question to both of you. I mean, you can choose between Uday and Ramaj that who wants to take up who wants to give the answer first. Given the environmental concerns and focus on distributed energy, green energy as a mitigating strategy, could you briefly outline what you see as the critical functions of electricity distribution sector today, perhaps highlighting the difference in how it operates or the challenges it faces in India versus the US? So, Raman, can you, start with it first?
If you want, I can start.
Okay, go ahead, Uday.
Okay. So, Vinod and Raman, first of all, thank you for having this session and join this session. So you asked the question that what are the critical functions the DISCOM is currently looking at, especially from the Indian context. I will try to elaborate from what are the data and my experience. See, the Indian power sector, if you look at, it has really come a long way. So even if you take the window from 2004 onwards, let's say 20 years window. So where were we at the beginning? So we started somewhere 35% AT&C loss, maybe more than that. Now we could reach 16% at this point. So this is an achievement. But the flip side is the financial losses, the cumulative losses. So if you look at the national figure, it has come to almost more than 6 lakh crores. So despite so much of, I would say, the capex infusing and all the efforts. On the one hand, it appears that we are improving, but if you look at financially, it's not. So basically, this is the driving factor for the today's DISCOM. And if you look at a few of them, of course, as I explained, the financial viability becomes the first and the foremost challenge. And every utility is, especially DISCOM, is struggling to achieve the financial viability. So when I say 6 lakh crores, so that amounts 75 billion US dollars, and almost 2% of the GDP of India. So that's where everything comes up. The second thing is which is directly contributing to this losses is a T&D loss. So losses, as I said, 16 to 18%. But if you compare it with the international or maybe the global benchmark, let's say even China, which is 6%. So we are not even close to that. The next, I would say, the challenge, keeping these renewables in mind, because we have a huge target of achieving the renewables. So currently, if you look at the renewables, it is about 22% of the national capacity. And we are likely to reach 40% by 2030. So this is on one side, the targets and achievement. But if you look at the ground reality, the integration is really a challenge. And I can elaborate what are the factors. The most important from the operation point of view is the modernization. Since we are not really financially viable, most of the DISCOMs are heavily relying on the funding, so from the central government and the agencies. So transmission losses, if you look, the bifurcation of AT&C losses, it is around 8 to 12% within different states. So for a national grid of the capacity 400 gigawatt, 8 to 12% of the transmission losses is a huge loss. And whereas the benchmark and even the China has achieved it below 6%, around 5%. So still a long way to go there. And the last thing which I think the discoms are focusing is customer service. So within the regulators report itself, it is found that 80% of the discom complaints are still around the no supply, that is interruptions, and the billing complaints, so which is the primary function of any discom. So this is what is the state of, I would say, the utility, and that is what they are focusing on. So that's the situation in India currently.
Thanks, Uday, for your perspective. Ramaj, would you want to, do you have a take on this? You heard what Uday said.
Yeah, I think Uday, thanks. Good to be on the panel. Uday, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's AT&C losses, and I'm glad to see India is progressing towards single-digit losses. I will talk about the challenges in US. US typically has been a one-way power flow. That's you have centralized power systems going all the way up to the distribution. And the key challenges lies in the grid modernization, right? One is the aging infrastructure is a big challenge. We have transformers which are even up to 80 years. And adoption of new technologies. We are seeing a lot of electric vehicles coming in. There are a lot of data centers managing these air loads. That's making changing the game. And the load forecast is going to double or triple in next 5 to 10 years. And the last thing I would say is regulatory framework and market mechanisms are more mature, enabling utilities to incentivize grid incentives from DERs. So basically, I would say integration of DERs, for a by directional.
Okay. Ramanj, from
Yeah.
your perspective, how do you see the challenges that Uday said, particularly concerning commercial losses and discom financial health?
Yeah.
Uh,
So
compared to the issues faced by distribution utilities in the US. I mean, in India, I'm sure that you don't have AT&C losses there, and you did mention that your challenges are DR. What can in the Indian what's it in the Indian context? What's your suggestion for the that if we have to work with regulators or if we have to make some suggestions somewhere, that what would you say?
see, I think the I mean in US technical losses is not an issue. It's around 5 to 6%, right? Which including commercial and technical losses. I would say for India, I would say few things is first is uh, it has to work in multiple facets, right? One is awareness among the people, right? Um, and second is adopting to the technology, right? What you measure is what you see. So
Mm.
deploying AMI meters, right? Deploying a lot of distribution sensors on the distribution lines and having that real-time visibility into the grid, right, would help cut loss some of the AT&C losses, especially on the commercial losses, right? And again, like in US, moving from a centralized generation to a distributed generation. So basically, you have DER sitting at the edge, supporting the load, and that removes a lot of your transmission losses. I think these are a couple of things I would say. And then, you know, making the regulatory body even more stronger, right? Making them questionable and giving the utilities to enforce any kind of commercial losses, right? There's no political blessing for certain set of people where there are incentives for not paying anything for the purpose of they getting elected or something like that.
Again, for your views, again, question to both, maybe whosoever wants to pick it first. Grid reliability is a universal concern, right? So, how do the approaches to maintaining and improving grid reliability differ between India and US, especially considering varying infrastructure, age, and investment levels? I mean, that's what we discussed in the first question in the first round. And where do you see? I mean, Uday, maybe you can start with that because so much of losses and then the expectation that with the renewables penetration, the issues which will come with that, where will the money come from?
Okay. See, in India, the situation uh, differs. Primarily, our Indian grids are we can divide it into two parts. One is, of course, the urban infrastructure, which is under the focus. Now there is a rural infrastructure or the DISCOMs. So currently, the reported figures are not very encouraging for the outages or the, I would say, the darks. 15 to 16 hours is a annual figure for the major events. That means any major event occurs, it will last for 15 to 16 hours. That's how the national figure comes out. Whereas the other countries, it's just 4 to 6 hours, primarily on the US side. So this is where we stand. So there is a huge, I would say, the gap and scope. Now the approach, I would say, the differs because we are primarily focusing on the, as Ramesh said, in India also, it's aging of the assets is a major factor, and not only aging, the sweating of the assets. That's another issue because I would say the stress or the loads on the grid and the transformers is not even because of the scarcity of the funding. So the assets are loaded, heavily loaded. Even I know the situations wherein the power transformer failure is a very common, though it may not be recorded and reported. But it's a very common thing in rural area, so which leads to these outages of 15, 16 hours. So then it leads to bypassing protections and all that stuff. So it is again deteriorating the grid. So this is another thing, and then technology upgradation. Since it's a vicious circle, since the DISCOMs are not, I would say, in the financial position to allocate the capex. So by the way, the capex allocation is not even 10% of their revenue in most of the DISCOMs. Ideally, it should be 25%. So this is the situation. Technology upgradation is another issue. Then, of course, since we are just going by the what we call as a maintenance is a major issue in India. Forget the preventive maintenance. Even the regular maintenance is hampered in most of the DISCOMs. So that's another issue. And then, of course, over the period, so a lot of recruitment is not being done. The trained manpower is another issue which is leading to the reliability. And as Raman expected, the regulatory enforcements. Since our primary focus is to achieve the financial viability of the DISCOMs, so this quality issue or the very reliability issue takes the backseat. So this is where we are standing from the Indian DISCOMs perspective, and a lot to be done. And the core of the issue is the financial.
Yes, Uday, we probably worked together on a project where we realized that you said 14 to 15 hours of outage, but average outage in a year. But we realized that that was a industrial commercial customer where in a year they have had an outage of about three to 4 days, and in one case they had about 15 days outage. So is that figure correct? The 15 hours per 15 hours national average, is that correct figure?
Actually, what you talk about is the actual SIFI figures, so which are not very reliable. So the figure which I mentioned is reported in the central government report as the major events outages. What does it mean? Suppose a power transformer fails. So typically it takes 15 to 16 hours to recover. So it doesn't include any other outages. So because those figures are not very trustworthy, so this is what they have come out with. So though it looks like 15 to 16 hours is not a practical thing, actually the outages hours are more even in a place like Delhi. So this is what they have come out. So, and this is a standard practice to, I would say, the quantify the major events, how much it contributes to your total outage. So it is on an average, if a major event occurs, it takes 15 to 16 hours to recover. As that's what that's why I given the example of let's say power transformer failure, even a distribution transformer failure in area. So it should not take much of the time to replace it or to fix it. but on an average it takes 15 to 16 hours. So forget about the other outages, what you are mentioning.
Yeah,
So
because
that's
that
how the
that
grid
was a
is.
point of concern when we analyzed their data. What we were trying to do is kind of Ramesh, we were working on some data of a large CNI customer where we are trying to have their grid integration with renewables and lower their power procurement. I mean, the client himself is interested in higher renewables utilization of renewables, and also wants but stable power. And we were doing some bit of a planning for them that how they can achieve that the green tag and as well as the stability. So we realized that their diesel gensets are in place just to cater to some of these huge outages which last as long as at one instance it was, I think, 13 days. It lasted for 13 days because I don't know what was the maintenance issue on the grid side, but they do have occasional outages, and it's in the neighborhood of Delhi. Now, remote areas, as Uday said, that they may not be even recording that. So, which is one of the concern that how do they expect the grids to get greener if the reliability is not there? And so, your view, Ramanj, on that, what Uday just said in the from the Western world side.
Yeah, I mean, we have something new California's come with called California Community Choice. So you have, wholesale, transmission, distribution, and now we have retail. Again, in retail, we have a California Community Choice where uh, it is grouped into multiple cities. You as a customer can choose which kind of generation you want to opt for, right? Do you want green electrons or non-green electrons? Based on that, the CCA would go and uh, procure generation which is green generation, and it's a bit expensive, but again, that's where the community comes into play and be conscious of I would say, community responsibility to get the right electrons. But again, what I would like to, going back to the original question, Vinod, here, I want to talk about the US challenges and how we address, and I'll come back to those points as well. I mean, the challenges in US we are seeing is aging grid assets, right? As I said, 40 to 70 years of transformers and climate-driven extreme events. Especially, I'm from California, which is a lot of wildfires, right? And
Right.
this is creating
Yeah.
havoc. And for us, wildfire has become official season now, right? Hurricanes, ice storms, and due to the natural disasters, and need to accommodate the bidirectional power flows, right? You need to increase the hosting capacity. And if you see, especially in California, the place I come from, where Tesla is just a couple of miles from my house, every house has a EV, right? What does it mean? Typically, you have about 9 kilowatts of demand on a daily kilowatt hours per day. With the level 2 charges, the demand for each individual house has doubled because these are like 19 kilowatt hours chargers, right? What does it mean? The demand on the grid has doubled if you want to take 5 houses out of 10. And the way US we are trying to solve these problems is heavy investment in grid automation, right? You guys talking about outages. Do you guys have a OMS system? OSMS system is outage management system which calculates your network indices like SEDI, SEFI, and all that. Even for that, you guys have sensors. What percentage of sensors are there to the last mile? Here in US, depending on the utility, we have put at least 60% of sensors which we are able to remotely monitor and control, and that's increasing. In transmission, we have about 90%, right? We are talking about softwares investing in AI, self-healing grids, right? Flizzr, VVO, predictive analytics. And of lately, we have been investing a lot on BESS for managing the short-term outages, right? BESS. It is helping not only to cover any short-term outages, but any excess generation from wind and solar gets into BESS, right? And that's how we're able to manage our peak loads. And again, it leads into non-wire alternatives. We don't have to build the transmission lines to just support a couple of hours of demand. We have invested a lot on AMI and microgrids as well at the edge resiliency. And again, there's a huge push from the regulatory based on performance-based, incentives tied to utility
Incentives.
profits, right? And then again, there are a lot of initiatives happening on underground lines for wildfire mitigation. There's a lot of technology. We are using satellite imaging to cut off the trees which is touching any of the transmission lines, right? Again, the key focus is reliability and resilience. And the for us, the most of the utilities, right, are IOU or munis, and getting capex funding is not an issue. You go to CPUC or any of the CPUC or UPUC, you can go for a rate hike. And people are PUCs are very tech savvy, and they do get approved with the cost so that they can invest on the capex on installing the new sensors. And there's a lot of investment happening on the OPEX part of it as well, right? As I said, we are age old. We are trying to invest and see how long can we extend the life of this transformers or any major equipment so that we can postpone the capex part of it. And I think
Nice.
my challenge would be my challenge for India would be Vinod and Uday is, there most of the utilities are state owned. What control does the government? What control has the distribution companies on the tariff? Right. Start from there. There is tariff. There's a lot of subsidies be given by the political power. I think that's a fundamental problem. Until unless you give the freedom for the distribution companies to come with their own tariff and multiple tariffs, right? Weekend, like, it's like a cell phone. There's a weekend deal. And I mean, when folks in India are able to spend money like 10,000, 20,000 on a cell phone, why not on the electricity which is powering it? I would start from there. Get the financial fundamentals right.
Yeah, so Uday, very interesting one. I mean, the load that comes with the EVs and the load that comes with then we have on the other side the generation, which is solar generation. And very rightly, our current government has significant focus on EV penetration and on the renewables. I mean, they've set very huge targets for that. Uh, uh, but do we think that our distribution engineers, particularly state-owned ones, they're ready with how to handle this kind of situation? I mean, have they even simulated these kind of situations? I mean, it is just scary that if the EVs come on grid with so much of load, do we have bidirectional grids here in India, Uday?
Yeah. See, our context is a bit different, as Ramesh mentioned. Basically, we are driven by the state-owned discoms of the utility. Few problems, inherent issues which we need to tackle. As he said, first of all, we are the state-owned utilities dominance into the grid. Second thing is the size of I would say, the discoms. They are of the huge size, mammoth size. Take example of Maharashtra. It's an integrated utility. Just one utility handling more than 2.5 crores of the customers all across the states. That's another thing. I will come to your question. Before that, this is the context, which briefly
Sure.
mentioned. Then second thing is the size of the grid. So in the Maharashtra, we are handling almost 30,000 megawatts peak load. That's another thing. So these are the primary, I would say, the context under which the grids are being operated. So the concern and the focus is to maintain the supply. So rest of the everything comes later. First of all, like in a hospital, first patient survival is most important. That's what these people are doing right now. To answer your question in the first part. In the second part, you ask what is happening on the renewables. So on the other hand, we have a renewable targets. Let's say we have a target of achieving 40% of total capacity. That means by 2030, you will become a grid of 800 gigawatt. That is 8 lakh megawatt. Out of which 40%, that means almost 4 lakh megawatts will be on renewable. So that's where the journey is happening on two fronts. One is we have the hedged and I would say, the deteriorated grid, and on the other hand, we are penetrating the renewables. From that perspective, some of the initiatives are taken by the central government, so as a central agency. So, like there was a concept, and there still it is there, of a green corridor, wherein especially these winds and solars, which are typically the big plants, are located far off. Let's say wind farms. Wind farms are located in a hill area typically. So naturally, you cannot expect grid presence there. So what they come out with a national grid with a grid green corridor allocation of 40,000 crores. So the state of that corridor since last 5-6 years is that it is not even 50% is completed. So that's on the one side. So if the plan is there, yes, plan is there, but the execution is just 50%. The second is another aspect is you asked about the EVs and this thing. So EVs, definitely EVs are also penetrating in Indian grid. So like Raman said, that becomes a challenge for Indian grids also. And what's the impact of that? Not only EVs, even the rooftop. There is a big scheme from central government, Prime Minister Surya Prakash Yojana, so which is warranting for the each house should have a rooftop. So like Raman mentioned, so it's a distributed, I would say, the DER. So that on that front, policies in place, but the major, I would say, the disconnect in this is the coordination between the state and central government. So, like I said, the green corridor is lacking land allocation, then permissions, and all that stuff. On the other side, that EVs and photovoltaic solar. So the major hurdle is getting the permissions for the solar plants. So that is what is causing the most of the average time taken just to get the permissions is 1 year, and the execution is another delay because the land acquisition and that. So there are a lot of I would say the bureaucratic hurdles which are getting all these things delayed, and that's why we are lacking on the execution part. On the EV front, I would say the studies you asked about the study. Are we really studying the networks for the EVs and rooftop? Yes, in the urban areas, the study has been done. In the rural area, it has been adopted because of complexities and all that stuff. Yes, in the rural areas, they are studying the impact of that. And of course, with the capex infusion in the urban areas, grids are being upgraded. But the major hurdle is still on the charging stations. So if you look at the reported figures by the government, so what we are achieving is just, you'll surprise, 3 charging stations, public charging stations, because we are relying on public charging stations rather than the home charging stations because they are slow. So public charging station infrastructure is just 3 charging stations per 100 vehicles, whereas China has achieved more than 25 to 30 public charging stations per 100 vehicles. So that's what they are actually achieved. So there's a lot to do. And then why we are lacking in the public charging stations? Again, the same thing. Because let's say I want to set up a public charging station at a highway. So definitely 2 constraints will come. One is the availability of the network, because there has to be a network. Then second thing is the load availability. That means I cannot just go and hook it up. So that has to be, as you said, studied and allocated. Because there needs a transformer, there needs an infrastructure. It's an expense. So the government is coming up with different policies and private players and all that. But the pace is not up to that level which it should have been. So in a nutshell or in a summarized way, we can say that there are initiatives, but coordination is the key and the speed of the execution is the key. That's where we stand right now.
And from the skills perspective, do you think our state distribution utilities and the consulting community out there, which is consulting these distribution companies, are they really skilled to help these guys? Because I see these RFPs which come out, they're kind of tailor-made for vendors. There's no scope for innovation in their exploration in there. Do you think that we have right kind of skills, Uday, in the country to go for these initiatives which are required?
Definitely
I mean, the
not, because
interventions.
definitely not, because we heavily rely on the prescriptions rather than getting it involved ourselves. So that's how the utilities are working. Because as I said, it is like making the patient survive. That is their first objective. So running the grid is their first objective. And all these things will subsequently happen. So there is no focus, as you said, because most of the times the tenders are coming in a prescribed way, because the central government other authorities will prescribe a tender. It will be adopted by the state governments, and then it will be rolled out. So that's how it is happening. So really speaking, there is no innovation, or there is no engineering happening at I would say the discom level, because we are believing in a one size fits all. So I think that approach is to be relooked.
So Uday, I have a question for you, right? It's very interesting as you went into different aspects of this. I just want to come back to the fundamentals. Let's look at the big picture, right? Modi ji wants India to be the second or the third largest economy, and electricity is one of the key pillars, critical infrastructures, which is going to help with the GDP, right? And again, coming back to this, let's go to the basics. Is the tariff which is available now in all of the states enough for capex and opex and for the growth? I think let's solve some fundamental issues. And just to add to that, I was in India recently, last year, and I'm amazed at the spending power Indian population has. The spending power. I was seeing everybody having a fancy cell phones and they are adapting to technology. Everything is on apps, right? Even I've seen people getting the haircut at home. Why is that kind of technology, or when a person is able to pay 10 to 50,000 rupees for a cell phone, why not pay for the electricity bill? I think let's start from there. You need to generate funds and allocate into three buckets. One is capex, right? One is innovation and opex. And if this is not being done at the ground level, to fulfill the dream of being a third largest economy with 20 hours outage, doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. Okay.
And a
If
very
I understand
interesting
your
question
question.
from outside. So Uday, you answer it, then I will also answer a bit of it.
Yeah.
I'll switch my role.
Okay. See, if I understand your question, what you're saying is tariff is the tariff is a cost reflective. That is the primary question you're
Yep.
asking. So
Mhm.
you will surprise if you look at the cost reflective figures for India. So I will spell out some of them. So which gives the answer. You know, our cost recovery from the tariff is short by almost 1 rupees. So every utility is facing the revenue gap in recovery. And what is expected is that is being compensated from the subsidies. Primarily, the difference between US and India can be the US subsidies. So subsidy, where are the subsidies actually going? The subsidies are primarily going into agriculture. So wherein your consumption is almost 30 to 40%. So that is being subsidized. So there is a revenue gap of 90 paisa or 1 rupees every unit we spend. Okay. So naturally, it is expected that these 1 rupee or the 90 paisa will be cross subsidized by other, I would say, the customer. And then if you are falling short in recoveries, so that hit is a major hit for the discounts, especially the government discounts. So that's where actually the gap comes up, and that's where we are amounting almost 6 lakh crores in a cumulative cash loss for the utilities. Point number one. Point number two is then why these tariffs are not cost reflective. So unlike in US, wherein the utilities are being looked at as a profit-making organizations or the utilities, here it is more of a public service. So that is the approach which need to be, I would say, the re-looked at if you really want to do that. and for which it's a political again will and the social aspect of the nation. So that comes into the picture. So what actually can be done to minimize this? We cannot reduce this gap to zero. So at least we can minimize it to a level. So in my own views, what is required is you have a pockets. So like for example, as I told for the Maharashtra, more than 2.5 crores of the customers, which may be more than a population of some of the countries, even US population. So if this is the size of a utility, it is too huge to handle. So why can't you split it up into the pockets? Because not that entire Maharashtra is a uniform in terms of their character. So you can have a belts, and then you can have the policies and the tariffs, which is specific to that particular. For example, Marathwada region where I belong is a drought prone area. So you cannot have the similar strategies which you apply for the Western Maharashtra, which is I would say the agriculture rich and there's a huge resources, like unlike the Mumbai area, which is the industrialized area. So you cannot have a rationalized, I would say, the policies or the same policy entire state. So these are something which are basically long pending demands are from the academicians and analysts like us, but it takes its own course in the political scenarios. So yes, what you say is right. The tariff has to be cost reflective, which is not the case, and that is what is leading every unit I bleed at least 1 rupees. So that's what is happening. But it is unlikely to happen that we get a cost reflective tariff in India. Yes,
So
Vinod.
just before Vinod, you take this, right? Thanks for that, Uday. If as part of this series, maybe if there's a takeaway, this is an area to be focused on. If you want to bring some change in the society, right? And this is applicable not only for electricity, same for gas and water.
Yeah, true, true. Ramanj, if you look at adding to what Uday said, if you look at we have two segments in our society: people who can afford and a significant population which cannot afford. You said that everyone has a cell phone, so it could probably be 10 or 12. I don't know those figures, but it could be that percentage. But then you have a significant uh, population size that where the phone is the necessity, but they may not actually have enough money to pay for higher bills and higher tariff. Now, what very interestingly, if you look at what Modi ji did he turned a lot of these consumers into producers by subsidizing the not actual bill, but by giving them free solar panels where they can generate and make use of their rooftop space. But again, here in the first phase, probably they've identified some households which can host the renewables, which can host the panels. But there is a significant population which doesn't have the rooftop. Now, they also need to be catered to. They need access to energy. What is interesting is that I don't see any regulator actually doing anything on the demand response or TOD, any state regulator or national regulator doing anything on the consumer side on the TOD or time of use tariffs. We don't see them doing that because we see people turning on washing machines, turning on heavy usage gadgets when the demand of the grid is peak. So, Uday, am I wrong? Is there any on the residential side, on the normal consumer side category, is there any TOD tariff in the country? I don't think
No,
so.
residential are not covered under the TOD tariff right now. But see, the major issue is, as you rightly said, the issue is uniformity of the policies. So I was just looking at even the TOD policy and the open access policies of different states. On one hand, as I said, you are promoting the renewables, for example, solar or wind renewables. So if you are promoting the renewables on one side, being an investor, let's say I am an investor interested to invest in solar or wind for that matter in different states. Unfortunately, my decisions will based on the local rules and regulations. So if I'm an investor, it is not a cakewalk. Let's say I looked at the Maharashtra policy and decided that I will invest 10,000 crores across the states. Unfortunately, I have to take a different approach in different states. Like we were looking at the Delhi scenario other day. So what these people have done, so that's what I said. There is no proper coordination between state and central. So central government wants to push renewable targets 40% by 2030, but the state utilities and state governments are trying to protect themselves. Like current global scenario, everyone is in a protective mode. So because what I feel is that if it penetrates in my state, I may lose my revenue because I would say the solar rooftop is a dent on my revenue because you will generate on your rooftop and then it will hit my revenue as a state utility. So what has been done in a very polite way is all these tariffs and overheads are being smartly burdened so that you are not encouraged to really encouraged to get into this solar and wind thing. So that is what is happening. I was just looking at the different states with the different policies. So it is so varied. As an investor, if I look at it, I will say better to walk away because I cannot scratch my head with five different states with five different policies. So this is where, like Raman said, the policy matter or the regulator matter. So it's not uniform. Okay, it may not be uniform, but at least it should be aligned in a certain direction, and it has to be within a particular framework that it will not go beyond this. So that is what is a major, I would say, the challenge at this point for the renewables and stuff like that.
So I think
So,
the interesting topic, right? I think one of the takeaway here. I just want to switch a little bit. Let's talk about the numbers, which I'm going to come to. Is one of the takeaway is how do you generate the financial model, right, for the investors, or how do you generate for discoms? Again, to put in these three categories: capex, opex, and then R&D innovation, right? That's a key, and I mean this is something you can start as a focus area as part of these discussions. And Uday, I'm from close to San Francisco area. We have my utility is PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. It is, I would say, half of California, right? With 5.6 million customers, electric customers, and the demand is close to 18,000 megawatts peak, right? And 1 million is 10 lakhs, right? Do the math. I think we need to even compare when comparing India and US, what is the usage per customer, right? And I believe US is pretty high compared to Indian household, and it's matter of time the Indian household is going to catch up to US. I mean the amount of real estate for any technology devices in the home is going to increase, right? But
yes.
again, you might argue it's 80-20 rule. 80% comes from CNI, 20 is from residential, but that percentage is going to change with EV and equipment coming into the house. I'm just curious, how are the numbers? If you were to take apples to apples for a 5.8 million customers, let's say in Maharashtra, Mumbai, or something, what is the load there? Current load,
I
weekly
told
load.
you, the load for the Maharashtra, barring Mumbai, excluding Mumbai, is this maybe last week we reached 30,000 megawatts. And I told you
And
that
what is
the
the
customer
population? What's the
population
population?
is population of Maharashtra is more than 10 crores, that is 12 crores.
So how many million would that translate into, Vinod?
So
120
it
million?
cannot translate into even 300 units if you really look at. If
No,
I
I'm just
remember
trying to understand apples to apples, right? So if you convert into millions, is it
per capita
120
consumption,
million, right?
yeah, maybe
So
even
120 million, 30,000 megawatts, and we are 5.6 million and 18,000 megawatts. I'm just trying to do the math. I'm saying the demand on the grid for India is going to ramp up really fast because this
Yes.
is going to
yes,
be a
yes.
third or second. I think let's go to the basics with the numbers, right? Like, let's do some numbers crunching. And what we are thinking here in US, the load forecast is going to double or triple in next 10 years. And India is going to be there. I think let's start with load forecast. As everybody is getting tech savvy, the penetration of EV, and Modi ji is talking about investing in data centers. I think that's where the whole match should start, I would say, right? What is
Yeah,
your
you're
planning,
absolutely right.
forecasting? Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And there are, if I'm not wrong, there are studies which are which have captured the India's demand forecast, and the grid planning should happen accordingly. And it will be very interesting to compare those figures and look at where we are heading to, and how is our grid's readiness towards that. One more interesting thing that I think, what is the role of, see, we know that we are, while as we have a very stable grid, otherwise, like, some will argue that we have not had a US blackout kind of situation, but that is because we simply resort to load shedding or uh, planning like that, because there's not so much of sophisticated, I would say, IT interventions, as you said, that, high level, uh, I mean, in depth level of technology adoptions aren't there. So probably that's why we have not had that kind of situation. But you see, some of the technologies that you spoke about, and when we talk to utilities here, because of their revenue deficit, because of their financial issues, they always wait for some scheme to come from central government, and then they will take decisions on that. And on the other side, there are some private distribution companies, which is probably uh, kind to have these discussions with some consulting firms from abroad. They come, they try to talk about AMI. Now, by the time US is now moved to AMI 2.0, we are still rolling out AMI first phase, and we
AMR.
don't know how.
Yeah.
AMR is done now. We are doing AMI, sort of AMR only, but it's not real AMI. uh, how do we catch up with that, and how do we change, what is the role? I just wanted to focus on that piece, that if this renewables, I mean, have to come up, so as a consumer, I also have a role to play. How do we make sure that a consumer individually, independent of what is grid doing, how do we ensure that my consumption is more green? Can I do that? Mostly I don't have, if I don't have particularly rooftop, but if I have rooftop, if we first focus on those which have rooftop, how the adoption can happen there, how do they take advantage of the solar
I can,
as
yeah,
consumers? Can I
yeah.
participate in demand response as a consumer? Then the distribution professionals, the utility employees there, what is their role? Then the regulator's role, and then the government's role there. That's where we drill down on each of their role, and then see that where are we lacking and where we can upgrade.
So, Vinod, it's a very interesting question, right? You're talking about the consumer awareness, right? Consumer awareness, so that there are two things, two sides of the coin. One side of the coin is, as a customer in India, do I have a choice to tell utility, I have a choice to only get green electrons versus non-green electrons? I think that needs to be changed. So here we have CCA, where I can go to the local, these CCAs are responsible for buying the energy on behalf of the customers, right? So I go to CCA, or I can opt to PG&E and go to CCA and say, hey, all my electrons has to come from green energy, which is a higher tariff, but they ensure that the generation what they purchase is coming from green energy. That's one. Is that an option for the customers in India? Second,
Oh,
demand response, right? Demand response can be two ways, right? I mean, demand response is basically you are asking the customers to sacrifice or move their non-comfort in a comfort zone to non-comfort zone, right? Yeah, maybe there's adoption of 40%, I'm not sure, right? But it is not comfortable for the customer, right? It's not convenience. What I would say is there any options, as you said, if not there's a rooftop solar, can we bring in some kind of a battery storage? You know what I'm saying? In the residential homes, instead of taking out the sacrifice, you mitigate with the battery storage for 1 or 2 hours, right? And charge on the night times when it is cheaper. And again, here we have something called Tesla wall, right? HEMS from GM. It is nothing but V2X. It is helping you both not only mitigate your demand response, right? So my dependency on the grid is gone, and I'm using my local home electrons to satisfy my demand, right? Not only that, if there's any outage, we are able to connect our electric vehicle and run the house with minimal appliances for 8 to 12 hours or maybe 2 days, depending on the size of the battery, right? And now for the utility, these outage minutes might not be counted.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of innovative solutions where you can do, again, awareness in terms of, people plug their cell phone chargers and go to sleep, right? There is a lot of
So,
awareness programs.
Ramesh, the subsequent sessions that we would do, I would think that we need to also focus on that. What is it need for entrepreneurs? What is, I mean, the young engineers or young professionals who are out there getting ready for this market? What is in there for them? What contribution that they can do to some green energy entrepreneurs? What are the possible opportunities there? I think subsequently, so that we know that what is the role that everyone can play, define the role for them, and then see that whether the stakeholders, whether it's a consumer or generator or the government or regulator or distribution utility or transmission utility, are they playing their role? Where are we lacking?
Right.
So
So,
and really see that where we are doing good, and if some utilities have done good somewhere, and then why is that not becoming a replicable story? So that's where we want to get to. I think Uday and you, both of you, have a hard stop for today, and thanks for having you on the panel today.
Now,
And
one
in our
small
subsequent,
point
yeah,
before
please.
we leave, because that's where I was wanting to conclude it, because I spoke about many of the challenges which this DISCOM scenario is facing actually. And we also heard from Ramaj the insights of what is the best practice and what is the experience in a grid like US, wherein the per capita consumption is very high. And as we said, we will soon catch it up, if not today, tomorrow. Now, having put it into the context and taking away from this, I think what we are lacking and what we should be focusing on is learning. Because right now, our discoms and the utilities are in, as I said earlier, they are in a prescriptive mode. Give me something, I will do it. The outcome, I'm not accountable for that. So that's what is happening. Either it has been prescribed by the central government, or it has been prescribed by the regulator. So where is the thought leadership from the actual stakeholders, the real stakeholder? Because if I am a patient, I know my problems rather than just approaching a doctor and telling him that you check what has happened to me and you tell me the medicines. That's not the right way. I should know my symptoms. Then only a doctor can prescribe you the medicine. So we are too much generalizing the thing. So I think the way forward for the discoms, and I'm telling you from based on my experience of working with the discom itself, is that we need a, I would say, the collaborative approach with, of course, the benchmarks like Ramanj, Pijani, and all those things, which is a benchmark. We also need the stakeholders from the DISCOM itself who can really come out with their problems, the real problems. We should also have the stakeholders on the board, which is the customer side. And then, of course, the academicians, like you mentioned. And then the most important is the industry. So if we have this framework, unique for each DISCOM, and which will be driven by someone, which it should not be driven as just one of the activity. It should be driven with the objective of betterment of that particular utility and that area. So I think that will be more meaningful, because everything happens in a prescribed way. Okay, someone is telling something, someone is telling something. Where is the thought from the real stakeholders? So I think aligned with your initiative, what you said, if we keep this as an objective and in mind, as a you call it as a utility center of competence or the excellence, whatever you call it, but the objective should be to generate a thought leadership which is specific to our problems, taking the references and expertise from the stakeholders, and of course addressing the real problems on the field. So if we can do that, I think that will be the great thing to do, which will really come out with the desired, I would say, the required areas of solution. And then it will also give the alignment to the industry that this is where we need a solution, and which will come up with the right thing rather than just spending the money for nothing.
So I think I just want a closing statement,
Absolutely.
Vinod, for today. Food for thought is, India has privatized telecom, privatized banking, right? Privatized pretty much most of the sectors. The innovation happens. Why can't
And
this
we've done
happen in
really
India?
good there.
Yeah, why not utilities? I want to end
That's
with that. Yeah.
that's absolutely the reason that why our first session is utilities.
Yeah, I mean, this
And
is
if we
directly impacting
want
the GDP.
if we
Yeah.
want to be if we want to be as professionals, enablers of Modi ji's mission of where he wants to take the country. And
Yes.
I guess we have a role also to play, and we need to be straight and blunt and call a spade a spade. I mean, where what is going
Exactly.
wrong, they need to scale up. They need to scale up. Otherwise, they are doing disservice to the younger generation, which is going to struggle, and they should not. They don't deserve to struggle. And our generation, we have to make sure that we tell them the truth.
Right. 100%. All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vinod. Really enjoyed this
Thank
session.
you.
Looking forward to more sessions.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.